I hope you said good. All right, cool. Thank you everyone for coming. It's quite a few of you. That's awesome. I see a couple names I don't recognize, but almost everybody I recognize. But that's okay. I'll introduce myself anyway. My name is Chris. I'm a marketing manager for Planetar, and I'm also, or rather, also was an iGuide photographer for some time. So um, that means I'm, suitable to teach you about the iGuide system. And today we're going to talk about user Panos. I have it on screen. So there is a document, an online document that explains this on our support desk. The title of this webinar was about aerial panoramas, and that's like what people use user Panos for. But user panoramas just refers to adding any content from any other camera system. So, a drone or a 360 camera or whatever into the iGuide. But like most of the time, that's an aerial panorama from a drone. But anyway, we'll get to that later. So today I'm going to try to keep it to 30 minutes. I'm going to try. And then you guys can ask any questions you want in the chat and I'll answer them after that. There's a few things I want to mention first. So I don't know if you guys can see my camera. I hope so. My office is trashed. So in case you're curious as to why it's trashed, I saw this article today on the internet, and it said that Nikon released a utility that would allow me to use my DSLR as a webcam. So I've had this ability, like I've already been able to do this using an HDMI via USB in, but it sucks. There's weird delay on it and it's not very good. So I thought, oh, this is so cool. But you need a special cable. So I'll just scroll down here. So if you have one of these cameras, if you're a Nikon shooter and you happen to have one of these cameras, and you thought to yourself, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could use my DSLR and or mirrorless camera as a webcam? So apparently now you can do that by plugging from the USB port on your camera into your computer. But I have this camera, the D750, and it needs a really weird cable. So I tore apart this morning at like 6 a.m. all of my bins of cables. So they're all over the place here. So I made a giant mess I have to clean up now, trying to find this cable so I could try it out, and I can't find it. And I give up. I'm just going to order one off Amazon. But how cool is that? Nikon releases a little utility. I've already installed it. It's like a quick driver update in Windows or for Mac that allows you to plug in your camera and it just will be recognized instantly as a webcam. How cool is that? And when I get it working, if I get it working, I'll let you know if it's any good. I hope it's good. I want fancy shallow depth of field on every video call. I think that'd be fun. All right, cool. So that's number one. I thought that was kind of neat. Thought I'd share it with you. Next one is PFRE. I'm just going to keep mentioning it until until it's over. If you're interested in learning about real estate photography, this is for you. So it's a virtual event this year. This is the page. I'll put it in the chat. Maybe Kelly will for me, where you can register. And apparently it's happening in 14 days. And there's all sorts of speakers. Check this out. I was playing with this earlier. You can mouse over and they like spin. Probably doesn't come across on your screens. But anyway, it's cool. So there's all sorts of interesting information that you can get. And look at that. There's the iGuide logo. That's because we're premier sponsors of this event. And I hope you go because I think it's really cool. And then the last thing is tags. So I put a post in the forum last week on Friday, and tags is in beta, and you can play with it if you want to. So tags are a way, in case you don't know, to add images, video, and text to an iGuide via these little, I'll just zoom in, hold on, via these little markers here that you can click on, and then little windows will appear with the text or videos or images. And it's in beta because it's really not finished yet. So if you have feedback, this is the time to offer. There's been very little feedback, to be honest, but the developers are actively working on it. So if you want to give feedback, this is the time to do that. So I encourage you to try out tags on one of the iGuides you already have. It's available for any iGuide, and just play with it. See what you think. If you want to be creative with it, go right ahead. Cool. Okay, so that was all I needed to mention off the top. Let me just make sure, check my notes. Yes, that's it. Okay, so this webinar is all about adding 360s or user panos from different systems, there we go, to the iGuide. So there's a few reasons why you might want to do this. So I'm going to try to expand your minds a little bit and tell you a few reasons you might not have thought of. So the most common reason that people want to add another 360 from a different camera to an iGuide is for an aerial panorama. So I'm definitely going to talk about that, and then I'm going to show you exactly how you do that as well toward the end. But there's a few other things that you can do with this that people don't really think about. So one of the sort of advantages of adding a 360 from a different camera is that you can use a camera to capture a 360 where the iGuide camera can't go. I mean, a drone, great example in the sky. There's a few other examples. So let's suppose that you don't have a drone, but you have a small 360 camera and you have a pole. You can get something that approximates, an aerial panorama by putting your small 360 camera on a pole. So that's kind of cool. It's still a bit aerial, but whatever. Or you could place the 360 camera, somewhere unusual that the iGuide camera maybe couldn't go, on top of a fence, or really low to the ground, or whatever you can think of creatively. And then another sort of thing related to that is that you can also take panoramas that are from, or 360s that are from the iGuide camera itself, or from any camera, but they're not from that property, and basically add them in. And I'll explain sort of like, why you might want to do that in a minute. But let's talk about sort of the benefits of having an aerial panorama first. That's what everybody wants to know anyway. So aerial panoramas are really cool, and they really add an interesting perspective on the listing. So if you have a drone, it might be a good idea to figure out how to create. I'm going to describe the basic process of how to create a 360, but it depends on the drone maker that the manufacturer of the drone and the software they have available to you. So an aerial panorama is really cool because it allows you to see the property in context. You can see it and then the neighborhood, and then you can see, things in that neighborhood. And I would argue that it's better than a really wide shot from the street, because a really wide shot from the street can still be fairly obscured by things like trees and cars and garbage day. It's garbage day. There's garbage all down the street. So having an aerial panorama really minimizes that, because it makes everything really, really tiny. Like a house is still quite large. You can still identify it, but all those things that would normally get in your way, don't so much get in your way if your camera's way up in the sky. So what I'll do is I'll describe the basic process of how to get an aerial panorama out of your drone, just the basic process. And then it's going to be kind of up to you. So I'm going to demonstrate how to add it to an iGuide, but I'm going to describe the basic process of how to get it. So and if you don't already know, what an aerial panorama is it's a series of images taken by an aerial camera, usually on a drone, almost always on a drone, that are stitched together to create a 360. So it's a whole bunch of images, 20, 30, it really depends on the manufacturer. So I'm going to use DJI as an example. They have something called sphere mode that you can use that will create that. And if I understand correctly, it will actually stitch it and show it to you on site. I could be wrong. I don't have a DJI drone, but that seems to be what I've read on the internet. So what that means is you send your drone up and you would engage with sphere mode, and you would tell it, make me a, someone just sent me a DJI sphere. Thank you, by the way. Here, actually, I'll load up in a minute. So basically what happens is that you're going to get this final product. So the iGuide isn't going to do any of that stitching for you, is basically what I'm getting at. You need to get what is called an equirectangular panorama out of your system, whatever that may be, so that you can then import it into the iGuide later. I've got a few examples, so I'll show you that, no worries. I lost my notes, hold on. Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so aerial panoramas, I'll show you that in a minute. But 360 cameras are quite cool. They can do some really interesting things. I already mentioned go up on a pole. The benefit of the 360 camera, I would say, so the benefit of aerials, I'm going to say, is, that you can get, a perspective from very high up. The benefit of a 360 camera is that it can go in places where you might not want to take your iGuide camera for reasons. So I'll give you a couple. So let's suppose you have a dock or a boat or something where you're like, no, I'm not taking my expensive iGuide camera over there, but I will take an Insta360 One X. That's a really interesting use case for a smaller 360 camera and adding content. Because everyone always asks the question, well, why wouldn't I just take a pano with the iGuide camera? And the answer is, well, maybe you don't want to, maybe the ground's unstable. There are some advantages to using a 2-lens system. It doesn't require any rotation, for example, that may be beneficial. So I don't know why, but a dock is like the best example for me, because you would walk out on the floating dock, set up your set up your 360 camera, wait until everything settles, and then, kind of run off, snap a pic, and then come back and get it. And that would be very difficult to do with the iGuide camera, because if you were to walk around the camera, the dock would, one of those floating docks would move, right? So that would be kind of challenging. But the sky's the limit. I mean, you can do anything you want in terms of adding that image data in. So there's probably lots of things that you could think of that I never would think of. So, don't be limited by my creativity. Either way, the third thing that, the third sort of benefit of bringing in the user panoramas, or the third type, I should say, and the benefit of it is that sometimes you're going to have data from essentially what is another iGuide that you want to include in, your current iGuide. So the best example of that would be something like a point of interest. So let's suppose 3 iGuides ago, you shot for some reason the agent said, hey, can you go over to that park and shoot a pano? And you say, yeah, okay, sure. So you go and you do it. And then when you get home, you realize that, or no, you go out and shoot the next day, sorry. And then you realize you've shot a house right next to that. And wouldn't it be cool if you had that 360 from the park in this iGuide as well? Well, you can totally do that. So all the images from the iGuide camera are all exported as photospheres, and you can download them if you want. So what you could do is you could take data from any iGuide and include it from previous iGuides, included in current ones. And you can take that as far as you're willing to take it. So for example, you could offer your agents a point of interest package, for example. Hey, would you like the local, I don't know, Main Street area that's down the block included? And, you've already got the panoramas. You shot them, last Wednesday. You could take those and you could insert them into the iGuide. And you can capture those just with the iGuide camera if you want. It doesn't matter what camera you use. You could also use a 360 camera as well. So just to sum up, there are a lot of benefits of adding user panoramas. And it's really, really easy, but it does require that you have a bit of forethought, because you have to kind of know you're going to add them ahead of time. And that's one of the main drawbacks. You can't really add them later. Technically you can, but you're going to get dinged for it. They can be expensive. It's essentially a pano update. But I'm going to show you some tricks. Anyway, let's dive into the demo. Like I said, if you guys don't remember any of the instructions today, no big deal. It's all in this article here. So, just relax and enjoy yourself, I guess. But not too much, because this is serious. All right, so I've got a house on screen. So let's suppose I have an aerial panorama and I want to add it to the property. In order to do that, I have to load that property into Stitch, and I have to add the user panorama before I send it in for drafting. So that's critical. There's a trick, there's a way around that, but for the moment, let's say that you have to do this. So in order to add a user pano, it's very simple. What I do is I select the floor that I want the user pano to appear on. So in this case, it's the main floor of the property. And then what I'll do is I'll right click on the floor, and I'm going to choose Add User Pano. So I'm going to click that, and then it's going to open up a little File Explorer window. And then I'm going to go to the desktop, and I have prepared ahead of time 3 samples. So I labeled one aerial. I hope that's aerial. Okay, that was easy. There you go. I've added an aerial panorama to the iGuide. Now I'm not done yet, but you can see that it's, created from a drone. And if I really want to, I can click on the Take Snapshots button, and I can look around. And there's some train tracks and some stitching errors as well. An escape park, I think. That's cool. I just got this from Google, so, you know, whatever. But anyway, it's pretty good. There is going to be a warning if you use a format that is not ideal. So I'm going to load up one right now again and show you that warning. And I'm going to tell you what the recommended size is. So that one, there was no warning. It was a pretty high resolution, I think. So I'm going to add another. Oh, side note, you can add as many user panos as you want. So if you sent your drone up and did 10, that's fine. You can include 10 if you like. But here, I'm going to right click on the floor, choose add user pano, and then I'm going to add outdoor. Here we go. Okay, so it's given me a warning. So it says the selected image resolution is too low, 3000 by 1500. So what we recommend, and this is going to make perfect sense, I hope, is that you upload at 7200 by 3600 because that is the default resolution of the Iguide Panos. So, you know, you can't exceed that, but if you want to match it, you certainly can. So if you don't have something that's that resolution, that's okay. It'll still work, and I'll show you that. So I'm going to click OK, and then what you'll see, oops, is that I've added this weird field. Again, I downloaded this off Google. So the cool thing about this is that you can add a panorama and you can kind of try it out and you can think, where should this go? What does this look like? You know, is this going to fit? But there's one more step I want to show you. Okay, once you have added your user panorama, the drafting team has no idea where relative to the property that aerial panorama was taken. So you have to put it where it's supposed to go. So you can see here, I hope, that I've got a pano center that represents this panorama that I've clicked on, the first user panorama, and I can put it wherever I want. So this doesn't have to be precise. You just need it approximately where, you know, where it was taken. So it doesn't need to be like way out in actual, its actual relative position. It just needs to be close. But my suggestion would be that you bring it in pretty tight into the, you know, where the data is. The draftspeople will bring it in a bit further if they have to. And the reason for that is that the further out that panorama goes, the smaller the floor plan gets when viewed in the Iguide viewer. So it's very handy if you keep it close to the property so that they can maximize the size of the floor plan in the viewer to make navigation easier. Either way, once you've put it where you think it should go, you've got one more step before you're done. So what you'll notice is that if I zoom in, there's this little cone here. So that cone represents the initial sort of shot angle, right? So I hope you guys can kind of see this. There's a green line that follows my cursor, and there's also a green line in the image. So that little cone represents what's in the box here. So what we need to do is we need to line up, or I should say rotate that aerial panorama so that it's approximately facing in the correct direction. So I don't have a house here to use as an example, so I'm going to use this skate park. So let's pretend that the house is the skate park. Well, right now, this panorama is facing in the wrong direction. So when people are looking on the tour, there's this little cone thing that shows you where you're looking. It will be facing in the wrong direction when people are looking at it. So what I want to do is rotate it. So you can't see, but I'm right clicking with my mouse and I'm dragging to rotate that panorama. And now I'm using the green line to indicate that it points down toward the data. And then if I look at the image, I can see that that green line, the corresponding green line in the image, is also pointing toward the skate park. So that's what I want. I want that line to be pointing at the data and the image, such that what's identified in the data is the same thing that's identified in the image by the green line. Fancy way of saying, or a complicated way of saying, you need to rotate the aerial panorama so it's facing in the right direction. So I'll recap. So in order to add any user panorama or an aerial panorama, right click on the floor once you've loaded your property in Stitch, choose Add User Panorama, select a panorama that's in a certain format, equirectangular, which we'll get to in a second. Choose Open, and then place that panorama wherever it's supposed to go, and then rotate it so that it's facing in the right direction. And then you're done. That's it. Like I said, you can add as many as you want. Now, the recommended format is what's called equirectangular. That's an aspect ratio of 1:2. So 3000 by 1500, or our recommended was it 7200 by 3600? As long as that ratio is preserved, it will look good. The higher the resolution, the better. Stitch is very forgiving in terms of what it'll allow you to upload. So it'll allow you to upload pretty low resolution ones. It'll just warn you ahead of time. And this all needs to be done before you submit it. So what that means is that you'll need to, can we, oh, sorry, I'm just going to read a question. Can we use aerial panos in the gallery? How will they look? Okay, so if you upload an aerial panorama to the gallery, like as in the photo gallery, it will appear in its sort of stretched form. It won't be formatted. I'll show you. It will look like this. It's going to work? Maybe. There you go. It'll look like this. It'll be all stretched out and weird. So don't do that unless that's what you want. Most people don't want that. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to include them in the tour so that people can see them and navigate through the actual 360. Now there's a few tricks. So now we're getting in. How much time do we have? Are we good? Oh, 8 minutes. Look at that. Drowning in time. Fantastic. Okay. So I'm going to teach you 2 tricks for this. So sometimes what happens is you get some drone panoramas and they're really cool, but you don't want to sprinkle them around the property. For whatever reason, you want to separate them from the unit itself, whatever that may be, or the structure that was measured. So that could happen for a high-rise building or for a farm or something where you're like, this doesn't seem like a fit. Like I don't really want to place it on the floor plan so that on the tour there's dots around the floor plan. Okay, no problem. What you do is you right-click on the main building and choose Add a Floor. Did that work? Where did it go? There you go. It's down here at the bottom for some reason. And then rename that floor, maybe Aerial, something like that. That didn't work, but whatever. And then what you can do is add your user panoramas to the new floor. So what that will do is that will create a floor. There you go. So I have a floor with one user panorama on it. That will create a floor that the draftspeople will interpret as images only, and you'll get little thumbnails, images, just like you would if you had a floor with just panoramas with no measurements. So that's trick number 1. Now, trick number 2 is pretty important if you have weather issues when you're shooting, or if your drone shoot is not connected to your iGuide shoot in time. It's not the same day, for example. So let's suppose you go out and you shoot your iGuide on a Wednesday, and then you don't get back out to shoot, or you don't go out to that property to shoot the drone stuff, or you hire someone to go out maybe on a Thursday or Friday. Well, if you submit the iGuide, how do you then add the drone pano in? So there's an expensive way and a cheap way. So I'm going to teach you the cheap way. The cheap way just requires a bit of forethought. Actually, I'll explain the expensive way, and then if you have to, you can do that. What you can do is request a pano update, where you pull the user panorama into Stitch as its own project. Basically delete everything else. You can use any project, it doesn't matter. But then export it and send it in and ask them to add it to the iGuide. So you're basically asking the drafting team to add a single panorama to the iGuide and basically give instructions on where to put it, and then they're going to bill you for that. So there's a fee, because the drafts person has to actually do that. But like I said, that's not ideal, but if you need to do it, you need to do it. But there's a cheaper way. So let's suppose you're going out in 2 days to shoot some drone stuff, and you think, wouldn't it be cool if I could add a panorama in? So if I know that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the same process that I would as if I already had the drone panorama. I'm just going to find any panorama. It doesn't even matter what it is. And I'm going to add it as a user panorama. So I'm going to check add user panorama. And I have a really weird, like, rendered one for fun. Thought it'd be kind of funny. There you go. Check this out. Look at that lighting. So this is like a computer rendered, panorama. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to place it. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to place it approximately where I think I'm going to shoot the drone panorama that I'm going to do later. So, I mean, this is approximate, right? Like behind the house, in front of the house, to the left, to the right, just somewhere, roughly where I think it should go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to export, but I'm going to disable this so that when the tour goes live, so you can see that's red now, it's disabled. That means that no one will see it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out, I'm going to shoot my actual drone panorama. And then once I've got that, when I get home, I'm going to go into the Iguide portal and do an image update and replace this weird 3D rendered nonsense image with the actual drone one. So what you're doing is you're basically putting a placeholder in. Now, if you really want to, what you can do, and this never hurts, is add a little note next to this panorama that says aerial. So what that does is that tells the drafters that that's not a mistake. You didn't include some weird random panorama as a one-off, just by accident. You weren't just messing around with user panoramas. You intended to put it there. And if you do that, they're going to see that and go, oh, I see what they did. They put a placeholder in so that they could come back later and add that panorama. So that's a really great, cheaty way of putting that placeholder panorama in, so you don't have to pay, to have the drafts people add a pano in for you. Okay, cool. 2:27. All right, good. Let me just check my notes. We're doing really well for time here. Usually I run way over. Placeholder pano, got that. Points of interest. Yeah, I'll explain that one again because I don't think I did a very good job. Okay, so let's suppose you are out shooting a property and there's a shopping mall across the street, and the agent says, hey, can you go shoot a couple panos of that shopping mall? You say, sure. And then the next day you have another shoot that's in the same area. The previous shoot has that 360 in it. So because all 360s from the Iguide camera can be exported as equirectangular photospheres, you can import them exactly the same way you would import photospheres for aerial shots or 360 cameras. So what that means is not only can you bring in data from other cameras, you can also do it from the Iguide camera itself. So imagine any Iguide you've ever created, all of those images you could bring into any future Iguides if you wanted to. And the most common way that you might do that is by including things like, things that are common to different properties in the area. This is a lot of benefits in like sort of touristy areas where there's sort of famous things that you might want to capture, or local neighborhood, important things in the neighborhood. So that is also actually sometimes taken care of, just as a side note, by aerial panoramas. So the actual knowledge base article here has an example. I wasn't going to show you this because it's not mine. I don't know if I can share it, but you can see here that there's a marker that's been placed here on a point of interest. So that's another way to use user panoramas to show context, show the neighborhood, show point of interest. This requires that you hard code this kind of stuff in Photoshop. You're on your own there, but it is really cool when it's used correctly. So the ability to see a house and then see, oh, okay, over there is a church, and over there is the YMCA, and over there's the downtown. That's pretty cool. So I can't show you how to do that, but I will tell you that if that is very attractive to you, which does happen, sometimes people ask me like, oh, that's so cool. Can you teach me how to do that? So the answer is not really, but Photoshop has the ability to open and edit 360-degree images. So if you have Photoshop, start there. Just figure out how to load a 360 into Photoshop, and then you can start mucking about with it. Okay, let's answer some questions. I see a few. Panorama drone photos have to be already stitched. Yes, so Stitch won't stitch them for you. They need to come out of the camera / software in an equirectangular format. The stitching software is either built in, like for example with DJI, or it's going to be some separate app or software. I don't have a drone to test any of that with, so you're kind of on your own there. Just Google it, you'll figure something out. Lightroom works great, and DJI can do it in camera for you. Yeah, so yeah. I have used the trick you just showed us to add panos after drafting, and it worked perfectly. perfect. Excellent. I'm assuming that's the placeholder Panos. However, the new Panos are not rotated correctly. Oh, that's excellent. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. So there is a trick to this, and it's often a little awkward. All right, so here, let me load up Stitch, and I'll explain the problem so everyone is on the same page. So let's suppose, or let's go back. When you add the user panorama, you need to place it, and then you need to rotate it. Okay. And the reason you need to rotate it is that you want the aerial panorama to be correctly rotated relative to the property, usually. So every panorama, even though it's a sphere when it's finally rendered, has essentially a center. There's a part of that panorama that's kind of like considered the middle, essentially, and you can move that center point around and then re-export the panorama. So let's suppose that you put in a placeholder panorama. It's in the right spot, but then when you upload it, it's rotated incorrectly. The way you fix that is you take that image and you move it center around. And the way you move it center depends on, like I said, the software you're using, but I'll give you an example in Photoshop. You figure out, approximately where that center is, and you basically take the image, cut it, and then paste it such that the center isn't it represents something new, that, something else is in the middle of the image. And often it's trial and error. But basically it's like cutting and pasting in Photoshop. And what you're doing is you're really moving the image left or right without losing any data. That's really hard to describe. I hope that makes some sense. But that's how you fix it. If it's rotated incorrectly, or you can just live with it. Some people just don't care. And they just kind of deal with it. But if it's a problem for you, take the image, load it up in Photoshop, and cut and paste one side onto the other side and move it around, unless you have software that can move the middle for you. Sometimes they will allow you to choose a center before rendering. Okay, cool. Will it be possible to have the new tags on the aerial start panel as markers to allow clicking on them in advance? So that's in my notes, to be honest, of a thing to investigate. Maybe I'll do it this afternoon, actually, because that would be awesome if you could tag, things in the distance. I did try it some weeks ago, and I couldn't get it to work. Because it was weird. It was very difficult to place the tag on an aerial panorama. But that was a while ago. That was even before it was in beta. We were just testing it. So like I said, that's in my notes to be able to add that. So I'm bringing that up with the software developers next week. So hopefully I'll be able to add that. Advance the structure further inside Panos. Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, that's a cool idea. Okay, I'll add that as a note as well. So what he's asking is, can you click on a link in the tag to then take you somewhere else in the tour, I think is what you're asking. I hope that's what you're asking. If that's the case, I'll make a note and I'll put that in as well. Okay, cool. So we're going to wrap it up early today if there's no more questions. I'm not going to drag this out. I'm exhausted. This is like my third webinar for this week. So I've recorded this, so I'm gonna put it up on Go Iguide. I don't know if you guys noticed this, or if I can even find it for you. But we were kind of experimenting with a sort of podcasty format. Let's see if I can find it for you guys. So the webinar that we did, let's see if it's here. Oh, that's the one. The webinar that we did a couple weeks ago about how to talk to clients was uploaded as a video, but it was also uploaded via audio only. Okay, I don't know where that is. I'll find it, but or I'll put a link in here somewhere. But that's so you could listen to it in your car. And it was sort of an attempt to try something that was like a podcast. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so you wanted to link the tag to another part of the tour. That makes sense, because then you could have an overhead one that had multiple buildings and you could click on it. That's cool. So last thing before we're done, please like and follow us on Facebook. Appreciate it. And when you post and you tag us, mention us, or use a hashtag, we'll share your content. It's really great. And then please join us next week on Wednesday for a Q&A webinar. with Sam. I'll still be there, but he's pretty much taking those over. And then next Thursday, there'll be another masterclass just like this. Same time and exactly the same link. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thanks so much for coming.